Good evening, everyone. Welcome to North Shore Reads. My name is Julie Backer, and I am a librarian with West Vancouver Memorial Library. I am joined tonight by my colleagues Josh Hamlet from North Vancouver District Public Library and CJ Pentland from North Vancouver City Library. While we acknowledge that we are all in different places this evening, we would like to recognize that for those of us on the North Shore, this event is taking place on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations. We recognize and respect them as nations in this territory, as well as their connection to the lands and waters around us since time immemorial. If you're uncertain as to which ancestral territory you live on, I encourage you to visit whose.land to learn more about the traditional lands on which you reside. I am grateful that we live, work, play, and create on this land. One of the many reasons I admire First Nations is their commitment to and respect for stories and storytellers and how they bring community together. Storytelling has brought us together tonight with Steve Burgess's thoughtful reflections on what it means to be a guest on someone else's lands, as well as his humorous stories about his own travels. This is our fourth North Shore Reads event, which is a collaboration of the three North Shore public libraries. The purpose of this program is to connect people across the North Shore communities through the shared experience of reading the same book. Previous events featured Suzanne Simard, Ivan Coyote, and Brett Popplewell. And this year, we're excited to host Steve Burgess and his book, Reservations, The Pleasures and Perils of Travel. Steve is a Vancouver writer and broadcaster and the author of Reservations and Who Killed Mom? He is a two-time Canadian National Magazine Award winner and winner of the 2022 Jack Webster Community Mike Award as Commentator of the Year for his work with the Tyee. He is the former host of At the End on CBC television and has been an occasional CBC radio guest host. We're delighted to have Steve in conversation with Marsha Lederman, an award-winning journalist and author, back for her second year as North Shore Reads moderator. A staff columnist with the Globe and Mail, Marsha was previously the Globe's Western arts correspondent. Her memoir, Kiss the Red Stairs, The Holocaust Once Removed, was published by McClelland and Stewart in 2022. Born and raised in Toronto, Marsha now lives in Vancouver. So without further ado, we welcome Steve and Marsha. The floor is yours.
Thanks
Hey,
so much,
everybody.
Julie. Hi, Steve.
Hey, everybody. Hi, Marsha. How are you?
I'm great. I feel like this is a really cool kind of Metro Vancouver situation because it's North Shore Reads.
Yeah.
I'm in East Van, and I believe you're in the West End, which
I'm
is
right.
different from West Vancouver and different from the West Side of Vancouver, as I learned when I moved here 17 years ago.
I'm right beside Lost Lagoon,
Lovely.
right beside Stanley Park. It's a beautiful place to be.
That's great. But tonight we're going to travel a little further afield as we talk about your wonderful book, which I so enjoyed. And I was showing you earlier. I have many post-its, keeping posted in business, one flag at a time. Um, I really did enjoy it so much. So thank you for that great read, which I really needed right now. We'll get into a little bit of the politics of the world a
Yeah.
little bit later, but I wanted to start with what I think is the scene that stayed with me the most uh, from this book, and really seems to sort of exemplify one of the main themes of the book. That is, tourist versus traveler, if I could put it that way. Um, you're sitting in a cafe in Palermo, in Sicily, and you're having an espresso. I learned that you love your espresso.
Very
And
important.
you're feeling, like I think you use the term enlightened voyager, like you're feeling a little bit superior about your mode of tourism, like almost like kind of someone might come up and ask me for directions sort of vibe any minute now. And then all of a sudden, a tour group rounds the corner, complete with like the paddle and the whole situation. I don't think there was an umbrella, but there was a paddle. And you feel instantly kind of like a fraud. So can you tell us about that moment and about why it's kind of so mortifying for you to be lumped in with that with the tour guide followers and to want to be different from that?
I'm really glad you mentioned that. I didn't realize you were going to focus on that. I'll just tell you a little bit of inside baseball. When this book deal happened, because David Beers, who I dedicated the book to, really worked to make it happen. And he's the editor of the Tyee. And when he told me that I had finally, after a lot of trying, a deal to make this book, one of the very first things I thought is about that chapter, and thinking that if I could write that chapter and make it work, that would make the book work. So
Wow.
that chapter you mentioned is actually, to me, it was crucial to the book, and it was a powerful experience. One of the strange things about that experience is that even after, as you say, what was happening is I was sitting in this alleyway in Palermo and I was having espresso, and it was near the Capo Market and these narrow alleyways. It's a very romantic sort of place. I was sitting just on a little plastic chair beside the wall, and the espresso was really good, as you might expect. It was coursing through my veins, and I had that feeling of exhilaration, and I felt like a romantic movie hero. It's like, here I am, the man of mystery, Charles Boyer or whatever, in Algiers. And I was thinking, I was full of myself for a moment, and then the tour guide turned into the lane with the paddle, and the people shuffling behind, and my little reverie popped. The funny thing is, but I thought about later, was that in a weird way, it didn't diminish the moment for me. I got a good laugh out of it, and I started to see myself as ridiculous. And yet that feeling I had of sort of, wow, this is great, that actually stuck with me. That wasn't completely destroyed. But nonetheless, to the point that you were making, and to the point I was making in the book, it did bring home to me, that moment brought home to me the fact that we have a romantic vision of ourselves as travelers, which just doesn't hold up anymore, because that romantic vision of travel depended on a form of travel that is now almost completely gone. I didn't make my way across the stormy Strait of Messina to get to Sicily. I flew, and I wasn't sleeping rough. I had a nice hotel room. So the idea that I'm some sort of romantic figure, it's nonsensical, and yet it's attractive. It's this idea, yes, I'm a man of the world, and really, you're a member of the tour. You're part of the tour group.
But you're not, because you travel in a very different way. You are not a bucket list traveler. You are not someone who wants to tick off boxes. You quote an ancient Chinese philosopher at one point who says, I have it on my
I
notes
think
here.
I think it's I think it's
A good
Lao.
traveler has no fixed plans and is not intent on arriving, which
Yeah.
sounds great in theory, but most of us have a return ticket and a job we need to get back to, and lives and obligations. But are you able in some way to be guided by that sort of ethos?
That when you say, when Lao Tzu says, the good traveler has no uh, fixed moment of arriving. Um, I felt that way on a trip to Singapore not long ago. They wouldn't even give you they wouldn't give you a bottle of water or a drink of water without paying for it. And I thought, yes, I have no fixed, intention of arriving, because I don't think this plane is ever going to land. But
Oh, you
no,
went on an ultra budget plane.
it was an ultra budget plane. And I was in the middle seat, and the woman in front of me reclined, and you couldn't get a free drink of water. Take that, Lao Tzu. Anyway, but no, the thing is, the I have advantages that a lot of people don't have, in the sense that I'm a freelancer. I pinch my pennies. I've been pinching my pennies for years. I live frugally, and don't go to restaurants and so on, because I want to save up my money for travel. But the thing is, because of the fact that I don't have a job, it allows me to travel for longer periods of time than most people do. And that gives me the chance to settle into a place and not have to rush around and be gone in a couple of days. So that's the main thing. It's like, when I go somewhere, I can park myself there for a little while. And that gives me a chance to just wander, which is what I love to do. I understand that I miss a lot of things because of the fact that I don't make plans, because I just loathe the idea of going to this place or that place that you're supposed to go to. You're supposed to get on this bus and go to that place, even if the place is worth going to. It's just like, yeah, I can't do it. So I miss some things. I miss some great attractions. But what I love to do is walk, just walk. Um, just serendipity is so important to me, and there is a chapter in the book about serendipity in it, and so there's a price to be paid. There is a cost to serendipity, because you do miss a few things. But on the other hand, I really feel that when you do find something, it's yours. It has more power, it has more impact because you stumbled across it. And you find things that other people don't find. So I'm a big fan of serendipity. I'm a big fan of taking a little bit of time, if you can, and not going here, there, and everywhere. I'm amazed sometimes when I see, and this I don't know if this is still true, but a few years ago, this seemed like a particularly Japanese phenomenon because Japanese workers didn't seem to get a lot of days off, and you would meet them in Spain or something, and you'd find out they arrived that morning and they were leaving the next day. And they'd flown from Tokyo,
Wow.
which to me, it was admirable. It's like, wow. And they would have it all mapped out. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to do this, and we're not going to sleep. And kudos to them. But boy, that's a tough one for me. That's not the way I like to do things.
Yeah, well, the New York Times, I think you point this out in the book, has its 36 hours in
Yeah,
feature, which is super popular. I think I have a whole book of them somewhere.
yeah. That drives. I see that. 36 hours in hell. God, that's not my idea of fun.
It's not for you.
No,
But eventually you came around and went to the Louvre in
I
Paris.
did go to the Louvre, and I
If you
eventually
want.
realized, okay, moron, you should have gone to the Louvre earlier. But on the other hand, it's like even the Louvre is almost like a microcosm of tourism in general, because you go to the Louvre and there's so many things to see, and then everybody's at the freaking Mona Lisa, and that's a bad experience. The Mona Lisa is not a good experience, but the Louvre has so much more to offer, and that's like tourism itself. That's like Rome. That's like Paris. That's like so many other places. It's like there are certain attractions that work like they function like bug lights, and everybody shows up at this place, and there's so much else to see. So, yeah.
Sitting on a plastic chair in Palermo in an alleyway just seems like the best kind of way to experience
And
Italy.
the other thing is, I think I mentioned this in the book later on. The woman who ran that bar was mean. She was she was mean. Like every time you would come back, you'd think that, oh, here's my repeat customer. She always looked at you like, what? Oh, you again? I thought we got rid of you yesterday. She was, and that was one of the things that I don't know. It kind of made it special to me. That woman was never nice to you, no matter how often you came back.
But the espresso, very good.
Oh yeah, yeah. It was an elixir of magic. Yeah,
So another major theme in the book, and probably more prominent than this traveler versus tourist question, is well, the title sort of says it all, the pleasures and perils of travel, and a peril that is very much on our minds right now is the environmental cost of
right.
travel and the knowledge that we have that travel is not good for the environment. And you asked beautifully, could it be that every vacation is essentially a guilt trip? Love that sentence. So I guess what you've laid out in this book is sort of an exploration of that question. Is that right?
It is absolutely right. And the thing is, again, inside baseball, I thought, oh, I shall explore this question and then I shall come to a conclusion. And then the book was over. It's like, no, I didn't come to a conclusion. That was like the Toronto Star review of the book, which was very nice review overall, but he did kind of kvetch about the fact that I never get off the fence about about travel. And on the other hand, going back to Dave Beers said that was one of the things he really liked about the book was that I don't get off the fence. But it's just like, what can you do? I mean, you are not going to put a stop to travel. You're just not. There is no viable alternative to long distance airline travel. There is. It's not like, oh, I can take a disposable cup to Starbucks and say, there isn't any disposable cup that you can take to Rome. You have to fly there. And so, what do you do about that? You can't, like, there's a real temptation, and I had this temptation to shrug and go, oh, well, we have to travel, so let's go. But as I talked to Giulio Mattioli through the book, who's based in the University of Dortmund. And, as he points out, it's like, okay, it's not like you can't travel. No one is saying you can't travel, but there are consequences. And if we are going to prioritize travel, then we're going to have to cut back on other things. And as he also points out, if you prioritize travel, you're prioritizing something that is still engaged in by a relatively small percentage of the population, where there are huge parts of the earth where people never get on planes. And we're eating up their carbon, footprint, basically. So you can't just be glib about it and say, oh, well, let's fly and hang the consequences. But on the other hand, what's the alternative? I don't think that even if you could put a stop to international travel, I don't think that'd be a good thing. I don't think it would enhance international understanding. I don't think it would make our lives better. It's just that it just seems like a kind of an insoluble problem. And that's why everybody's hoping for technological solutions. But writing this book and researching this book was a real education for me. And I was like, okay, technological solutions, you're up, come on. And what I was hearing from people like Giulio Mattioli is they're just not going to come in time. They're not going to come in time. And the technological solutions that are in the pipeline right now are technological solutions that will maybe work for short flights or medium length flights at best. But nobody has got a recipe right now for eco-friendly flights from Vancouver to Paris. That's not even in the pipeline.
So then do we stop going to Paris? I mean, that's the question.
Right, right. The one I will say, having said that, I will say maybe there is one thing in the pipeline. When it arrives, we'll see. But the thing that seems to have the lead right now is what they call sustainable aviation fuel, SAF. And that is fuel that is made from biodegradable, sources. It's not fossil fuel. And there is even one type of fuel that actually takes carbon out of the air to make the fuel. And so you get zero emission flights because the flight uses up only as much fuel as it took out of the atmosphere. But I don't think that they're close to ramping that up to, industrial usage. So these things.
Well, and you write about cruise ships. Cruise ships have changed not that you're a fan of the cruise ship, but they've changed their mode of fueling, I guess.
Yeah, their propulsion systems have changed. Yeah, they're going now for LNG, and that's an improvement. But also, you have what's called methane slip from LNG fired cruise ships, and methane is one of the worst greenhouse gases there is. So even that's not foolproof. And the other thing is that because LNG refueling stations are not as common as diesel, or not diesel, but the heavy fuel that cruise ships use, they're not as common. And so therefore, basically most of these cruise ships that are LNG are also hybrids that also run on heavy fuel. So, a ship might run out of LNG and be unable to fill up. However, having said all of that, it's an improvement, I think, overall. The fact that cruise ships are using LNG is an improvement. And then the other issues with cruise ships. There is the gray water and black water. The water that they put out. They have scrubbers, but they have what they call open loop and closed loop scrubbers. The closed loop scrubbers are the really environmentally friendly ones, and almost nobody uses them. Open loop scrubbers are the ones that clean the water and then dump it back into the ocean. It's cleaner, but it's not necessarily completely clean. So that's a bad thing. And then the third thing is whales. Um, these ships run into whales. Now they are, for the most part, I think cruise ships are cooperating in slowing down and to prevent whale strikes, and also trying to use quieter propellers because when you have the noisy propellers, they create the bubbles create such a din underwater that the killer whales and other kinds of whales they can't communicate with each other. So, but that's not just a cruise ship thing. That's not just a travel thing. That's a shipping. That's for shipping freight and so on. All kinds of shipping suffer from those problems.
Okay, well, this is turning into a very depressing
It's pretty
conversation.
grim, isn't it? It's a grim discussion, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us.
On depressing, just another depressing question, and then I'll go to something fun. But
Oh boy.
and it's actually kind of funny. But since we're talking about cruise ships, which you have never been on a cruise, correct?
Nope.
Right.
Nope.
I predicted that during COVID that the cruise industry was finished. I thought no one is ever going
Right.
to board one of those ships after these nightmare stories, which you tell, which you write about in the book. And yet the cruise ships, they're floating around with lots of people on them. And this particular, this is a very fun fact in your book that Republicans are more in America. Republicans are more likely to go on a cruise than Democrats. Any
Yes.
theories about that you want to share in this public forum?
I would think that I would guess that when people say cruising is bad for the environment, Republicans are less likely to give a damn than Democrats. I would say that's one thing. And I would, oh boy, that's a tough one, isn't it? Um, I would think that Democrats, in general, this is these are generalizations, but I would think that Democrats might be more in favor of kind of a travel that prioritizes getting to know the locals, and I'm sorry if I'm insulting any Republicans in the audience, but you know that I would think that maybe Republicans might be a little bit more amenable to the package tour experience, where it's like we get to go on vacation, but really we're in an American bubble. It's still America. We're looking out the window at the Coliseum or whatever, but basically we're still in America. And I will also say that's not just an American thing by any means. There is a chapter in the book about enclave tourism where people say, hey, let's go abroad and then let's go somewhere where we won't actually have to talk to anybody except people from our country. And that's a very common thing. I remember hearing years ago uh, tourism people complaining about how the Germans wanted Wiener Schnitzel or whatever or sauerkraut. And it's like, why did you come here? You're in Thailand. What is the point of traveling if you just want to eat like back home? But yeah, I mean that is true. It's like the stats show that Republicans are more. Well, oh wait, here's another thing that I just remembered from the book though. Bo, the stats after the pandemic went up for Republicans compared to Democrats. It was closer before the pandemic. It was closer after the pandemic. Far more Republicans were willing to get on a cruise ship than Democrats. And there's a solid reason. It's because the Republicans under Donald Trump played down the reality of COVID. You had people saying, like Donald Trump saying it was a hoax. Um, and so I think probably that's why a lot of Republicans were more willing to get on cruise ships afterwards, is because they tended to be dismissive of masking and vaccines and the whole thing.
So on COVID, sorry, I said I was going to get away from depressing topics, and I promise I will shortly. But since you mentioned COVID, you have done some traveling since COVID. You've gone back to places you had been to before.
Right.
Italy, for instance, Rome. What kind of changes have you noticed?
Well, one thing I noticed was that a lot of places had gone out of business. That the ravages of the pandemic had been economic. That was really obvious. Like, I mean, across from my regular hotel, family-run hotel, the place was out of business. I went to one of my favorite. This is another story I liked. I went to one of my favorite delicatessens. I won't mention the name because there's a kind of an insult here. But I went a number of places and they were out of business. And I went to this one time-honored delicatessen, a famous delicatessen not far from the Vatican, and it was gone. So I thought, wow, there goes it's the pandemic. I went next door and I asked the guy next door, how long has it been closed? He said, oh, closed down, 6 or 10 months ago. And I said, oh, it was the pandemic. And he goes, no, I was the owner's son. He was an idiot. He ran it into the ground. I said, oh, okay. I said, there's no vaccine for that, is there? Yeah,
Uh,
if the owner's son is an idiot, there is no vaccine. So,
there's another through line in this book, and it's a love story. I told you we're going to get to
mm,
happy stuff,
yes,
although it's not always happy.
yeah,
Um, and there's a woman you meet, and you travel around Japan with her. It's the first time you visit that country. And I don't want to give too much away in case anyone who is with us tonight hasn't read the book yet. But it really got me thinking about travel and how much our memories of the places we go to aren't just about the sights we see, but the experiences we have, the people we're with, what's going on in our lives, and kind of how that relates to what we're seeing. And then I wonder now, and you write about going back to Japan,
mhm.
is it possible to go to Japan and experience that country without her in the background somehow?
That was a really crucial question for me the second time I went to Japan. Because the first time I went to Japan, which is what I describe in this book, it's a through line that runs throughout the entire book. I was having an experience that other people don't get to have because she was really well connected. And I was privy to things. I went into the most famous geisha house in all Japan, which the author of Memoirs of a Geisha, who set a lot of the book inside this place, the Ichiriki, he never got in because you can't get in just with money. You have to know the right people, and the woman I was traveling with knew the right people. So I was having these experiences that other people don't get to experience, and it was really amazing. So, and also I was being babysat because I didn't know the language, and I was helpless. Um, and so when I went back the next time, I thought, oh my gosh, what's that going to be like? And in fact, it was great. It was a very different experience, but it was a great experience. And I've been going back to Japan for over 20 years now. And now I have the experience that I have, which is, not so much the insider experience that she was giving me, but it's still Japan's a remarkable country. And if you learn a few little phrases, it's remarkably useful. You don't, I mean, I do not speak Japanese by any means, but I can say a few things. And once, this is a proud moment for me, once in a moment of semi crisis, I actually was able to put together a Japanese sentence and the person understood me and helped me out. Wow, that was a peak travel experience. I was lost and I was looking for the Marunouchi subway line. And I thought, wait a minute, I can put together some words here. And I went, sumimasen, Marunouchi-sen doko desu ka? And the guy pointed. Yay! Yay! Peak travel experience. I asked for directions in Japanese and received them. So,
You
but
get lost a lot because you don't travel with your phone, or has that changed? Please tell me that's changed.
no, 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 no. It hasn't changed. My phone is an iPhone 4. iPhone 4. And when it came out, there was no such thing as Instagram. And it doesn't have navigational apps. It would be if I had it in my pocket, the only thing that would be happening would be Rogers would be charging me roaming rates. And who am I going to call anyway? So I understand that I am not exactly Mr. Techno, and people say, look, you can get phones over there, or you can get another chip or whatever, and I've just never bothered to do that. So no, I don't travel with a phone, and yes, there's a price to be paid for that. There is a price to be paid. There are situations in which I cannot take full advantage of the situation because I don't have a phone, but it's not that big a deal. I mean, we all traveled without phones in our lifetimes, those of us who are old enough. The phone as an aid to navigation is a fairly recent development in human history. So,
Indeed.
yeah,
So, got your compass when you go?
I got nothing. I am so bad. I could get lost. Like, I just am a champion at getting lost. I'm the kind of person who'll be walking down the street and duck into a store, come out of the store and walk the way I came without realizing it. I'm just a fool. And so, and that's great when you're being serendipitous because then you bump into things. Like I tell the story, I got this wonderful 2 pound tour of London because I got onto a double decker bus in London wanting to go to Trafalgar Square, and it was the bus going in the wrong direction. And I ended up getting a tour of London. Places that I would never have otherwise seen ended up in the village of Crouch End, past a couple of prisons, as I recall. So I got to see a lot just from being a klutz. So that's all great. It's just the problems come when you actually have to get somewhere, like when you have to find your hotel or whatever. Then it's hellish. It's hellish. Last time in
Yeah.
Bangkok trying to find my hotel, I was standing on the street at night, actually screaming to no one, just standing there going, finally,
Did you?
so someone took pity on me and showed me the way. So,
Glad to hear it.
yeah.
I'll try that next time I get lost. It
Yeah.
might
Try to
not
look
go
pathetic.
that
Try to look
well.
pathetic. Try to scream. That works.
Now, you mentioned that you've been to Japan many times. You just mentioned Thailand, which is another favorite, and Italy, which we've talked about. Rome, Siena is another favorite of yours. So, how do you juggle the desire to return to the places you love with the desire to see something new?
Ooh, there's a good question and one that hits home. It hits home because okay, for years there, like the thing is, actually a really conservative person. So it's like, oh, I liked this place. I just want to go back there. And so for years, I would force myself, I would say on every trip, my trips were usually about 6 weeks long. And I would say to myself, you're going to go back to some place you love. You're going to reward yourself, knowing that at some point in this trip, you're going to go somewhere that you love and are familiar with. And you are also going to go somewhere new so that I can balance it. So, on the off chance that I go somewhere new and I don't particularly like it, I know that there's this reward waiting for me that I am going to go back to wherever, Bangkok or Rome or whatever, and say, I'm back where I want to be. So, but having said that, I've been cheating more recently and I'm just going back to the places I like. But okay, my next trip is back to Japan and it's March, April, and I am going somewhere new. I'm going to a town called Onamichi. It's a city, I think, Onamichi, where you can rent bicycles and go across a series of bridges on a long bicycle ride to the most uninhabited of the major Japanese islands, and then you can take a ferry back. So that's something I've never done before. So, but that's the basic philosophy I've had for years is just reward yourself by going somewhere that you love. And then once you know that that's in your pocket, you can go somewhere else and be more adventurous.
I like that. That's good. That and Onamichi sounds fantastic.
I hope so. I hope so. Yeah.
There is a fascinating chapter in the book called Moral Hazard that I want to talk to you about. You
Mm-hmm.
meet this family in Kathmandu in 2009. They invite you to their home. You end up giving them some money, and then you send them a bit of money. You're never sure, is this friendship real or is this some scam? Can you tell us a bit about that? And have you come to any conclusion about what actually was going on there?
Yeah, that's a tough one. All right, that's a tough one, and I think a lot of people have had similar experiences. It was in Kathmandu, and there was a family. There was a father and a girl who was about 15 years old, and just such a lively young woman. And they were selling these games called Tigers and Goats, which is a great game. I brought a couple of them home. It's an interesting game to play. But anyway, they were selling these Tigers and Goats game, and she was explaining it to me. But then she was talking to me about her dreams and her goals and how she wants to go to medical school and help the poor and so on. And I was just, sitting and chatting with her and everything. And she said, "Oh, you're my first foreign friend." And, I think that was legitimate. I mean, I think that she was, I don't think it was some sort of scam. I think she was pleased to be talking to me. And I went back to say hello. And then she and her father invited me to visit the family home. So I did that. And that was pleasant. And then I left. I left them a little bit of money. I didn't know what was expected of me, really. And then this young woman sent me, after I was back home in Vancouver, she sent me a message asking for some help for her education. And I'd written a magazine story about her. And I thought, okay, well, look, I got paid for that magazine story. So it's only fair that I give her some money. And then she wrote again, and I gave her some more money. And then, but she kept writing, and I started to get uncomfortable with it. And it's not that I thought that the whole thing was a scam, but I just got the impression it's like, look, if you're a family and you are in genuine need and you just found a pump that pumps money, are you going to stop pumping? No. As long as the pump keeps giving you money, you're going to keep pumping it. And I just thought, so I had to ask myself, are you willing to basically be a sponsor for this family? And I thought, no, that's not something I can afford to do. So I decided not to do it. And then what happened was the earthquake hit, the big earthquake hit. And then I got another message from the young woman, and I knew that this was not BS because I'd seen that just where they had their blanket in Darbar Square in Kathmandu was devastated. And I knew that the need was real. So I started sending them money again. But then after 2 or 3 times, I stopped again. And then the unfortunate thing happened where I got a photograph in which it appeared to show a young woman whose face you can't see connected to a bunch of tubes in a hospital bed. And there's a message purporting to be from the young woman's father saying, she was hit by a car. She needs money for the operation. And I thought, I don't think so. But for one thing, the letter sounded exactly like all the letters. It looked exactly like all the letters that I got from her previously, and I had no reason to believe that her father wrote in English. And it seemed sketchy. So anyway, so then I decided not to respond. And then a year or two later, I got a message from the young woman saying that she'd found that magazine article online and she wanted me to take it offline. So she recovered. If she was in the hospital, she recovered. But it's a complicated thing. I was talking to one woman who I quote in the book who said, you should have kept giving them money, basically. And it was true. It was a decision. As opposed to being scammed, it was a decision where I said, no, this is not something I can afford. And I'm not going to keep doing it. But it's like, this is the idea that this highlights is that we as travelers have this idea. This is kind of like a variation of the thing where I'm sitting in the Palermo alley saying I'm a mysterious traveler. The other side of that is also that I'm in Kathmandu saying I'm just one of the people. No, you're not. You're a rich person from a rich country, traveling in a country that where the average income is a great deal less than in Canada. And how do you expect that people aren't going to see you as an opportunity? Of course they are. You're like a $10 bill walking down the street. So you can hardly blame people if they see that this is a chance to better themselves. And that's what you represent. And if you think you're going to really um, deal with people on an equal basis. Well, you know, no, when I go to Japan, I can do that, because people I meet in Japan, they probably have more money than I do, Um, but it's you cannot lose the fact that there's an economic imbalance, and that you represent someone who comes from the global north with a lot of money.
So when you travel, you are bringing money to an economy that might need it very badly. But you might also be traveling somewhere where travel is hurting the land. You write about the problem of over tourism. Um, and one of the people, this is related, one of the people that you interview talks about ecotourism as being an oxymoron. Like there's no such thing as you going somewhere, making some place better because you're bringing, your carbon footprint and a bunch of other stuff along with you. Um, what do you think of that? Do you think there is a way to be a responsible traveler beyond the environmental footprint, but, coming into a new place and bringing everything that comes with you there?
I think there are things you can do to make it better. I don't know if you can ever completely change the fact that you're an outsider coming to a place where you don't live, but I mean, but I think there are a number of things you can do, and there is a chapter in the book in which I go whale watching right here in town, because that was one of the interesting things that I discovered when I was doing some research of a couple of people from, I think, New Zealand, who did a study about ecotourism. And as they were saying, no, you can't, like, ecotourism isn't going to be beneficial if you build a bunch of infrastructure out into this, eco destination and bring people to it. No, that's not going to be a good thing. No matter how they dress it up, that's not going to be a good thing for the environment. No, they were saying was that paradoxically, the best ecotourism jumps off from cities because the infrastructure is already there. So, and nothing has to be built. So you would think that the ecotourism means going off into the wilderness. In fact, the best ecotourism starts from a city. And the very definition of that is whale watching. Now, whale watching, of course, has its problems because there are unethical whale watching companies. They get too close to the whales, they harass the whales, and the motors cause noise. But there are ethical whale watching companies that cut their motors whenever they get within 200 meters. I went out on Prince of Wales, local firm, and they are as ethical as as these people can be. And, whale watching is a hell of a lot better than whale hunting. And whale hunting is not that far removed from we had a whale processing facility in the Vancouver area as late as the 1960s. So, whale watching can be, I think, a good thing if it's done responsibly. And it's the kind of ecotourism that doesn't require you to build up an infrastructure in an ecologically sensitive environment. You leave from Granville Island, So
Yeah. I want to talk to you about the question of supporting countries with problematic regimes. Beyond the ecology, the geopolitical issue. So you've been to Myanmar, you've been to China. Have you ever stopped yourself from visiting a place because you didn't want to support the government of that country?
sure, I mean, I stopped myself from visiting Myanmar until that moment came when all of a sudden it seemed like it was okay to visit Myanmar because Aung San Suu Kyi had been released from captivity and was part of the government. Uh, Barack Obama visited, and there was a sense of openness. So before that, I wasn't going to go to Myanmar. But during that little window, which we didn't know was going to be a window, I went to Myanmar and stood about 15 feet from Aung San Suu Kyi, which was a very surreal experience. But then everything shut down again. Uh, and, I'm sure as hell not going back now. But as I mentioned in the book, there are two Nobel Prize winners who disagree on the question of whether tourism is a good thing or a bad thing in a repressive regime. And those two Nobel Prize winners were the Dalai Lama and Aung San Suu Kyi. When she was uh, under house arrest, Aung San Suu Kyi said, "Don't come to Myanmar. Don't. If you come to Myanmar, you'll be supporting the military government." Dalai Lama said, come to Tibet, even though we are occupied by China. Come to Tibet because it's ordinary people that benefit. So there's no one point of view. Um, it's a tough one. On this trip that I'm taking that I mentioned, I'm going to Japan. I had to stop and think because I told myself that I would never go back to Hong Kong when democracy was being repressed. Well, I've decided I am going back. Um, and that's a tough one. I don't know whether I'm doing the right thing or not. But I did opt for the Dalai Lama approach there, where it's like, okay, if I go to Hong Kong, I'm spending money that will, be helpful to people. But you could tell me that I'm doing the wrong thing, and you'd have a point. David Eby has just told us that we shouldn't visit the United States, and I'm sympathetic with that. Like I love to go to, and it's a tough. My favorite city by far in the United States is San Francisco. Well, San Francisco is a Democratic state, and Gavin Newsom is leading the governor, Gavin Newsom, leading the opposition to Donald Trump. So surely I can go down to San Francisco and still be okay. But on the other hand, it's still the United States, and if the United States is going to punish us with ludicrous tariffs based on fairy tales that Donald Trump is telling, do you really want to, be supportive of that?
Yeah, I think this is obviously a hugely relevant question right now. I said to my son, okay, we're only going to go to blue states. That's going to be our plan. Meanwhile, he's a huge soccer fan, and I had already bought tickets for a FIFA game in Atlanta. Georgia is not a blue state. And what do I do with that? Do
Here's
I
what you
sell
do.
the
You, you
tickets?
you justify it to yourself by saying Georgia isn't a blue state, but Atlanta is a blue city. That's what.
Rationalization
Yes,
101.
there you go. Rationalization. It comes to your rescue every time. Yeah, no,
Thank you.
Atlanta votes heavily Democratic. It's the rest of the state that screws it up. So
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that.
you have my
Um, I,
blessing. You have my blessing.
but I think people will, you know, go visit places in Canada as opposed to the US because of what's going on. First of all, if well, the dollar is one thing, but beyond that, it's just a really, yeah, without getting too political,
Yeah.
I'm not sure I
Well,
want to
it's
go around
it,
that.
like, yeah, this is not, we didn't set this up as a political discussion, but it's pretty frightening. It's a pretty frightening situation. And yeah, and honestly, unfortunately, the things that we're being asked to do, by our American friends are, as I say, based on fairy tales. You this idea
Yeah.
that we're going to close the border to drugs. The amount of drugs coming over the border to the United States from Canada is pretty damn small by comparison to others. Anyway, but we're off topic.
Yes,
Um,
we are off topic. So let's go back to travel. And I do want to say that we're gonna start taking questions in a few
yeah,
minutes. So I hope people are sending questions, and I'll check for those in a few minutes. But I wanted to ask, is there a place you're dying to go? Like a place that, if you had a bucket list, God forbid, would be on top of it
you mean a place that I haven't been?
that you haven't been to? Yes.
Ooh, that's a tough one. Um, I don't know about dying, but yeah, there are. I would like to. I've never really toured around England. I'd love to do that. I've never gone to parts of France like Normandy and Brittany.
Mm.
That I would love to do. Um, I would. I've done some. I made one visit to Scotland, but I'd like to go back and maybe go to some other places in Scotland that I haven't been to before. Um, So those would be those would definitely be places like you just to drive around. I mean, for years I used to hear so much about Ireland, and I would get sick of it. It's like, oh, it's so charming. It's so yeah. Shut up. Sure, it's charming. And then when I went there, I was like, holy crap, this place is charming. It's the best. So I went back within 2 years. I love and the thing that I was able to do in Ireland is just rent a car. And usually when I travel abroad, I like to get my ducks in a row. I like to get my hotels lined up or whatever. Not when I went to Ireland. I just drove around and looked for bed and breakfasts. Um, and I did an entire circuit around the island, and that was such a great experience. Such a great experience. And I'd like to have a similar kind of experience maybe in England, but it's awfully expensive, you know.
Yeah, and it's much bigger. Ireland is so small, so
Right.
compact,
Yeah.
and like 3 hours from Dublin to Galway, right? If you're going
Yeah.
across.
Yeah. It's true.
And is there a place that you have been to that you are just dying to go back to?
Well, I do that. You know, I feel like I if you told me that I would never be able to go back to Rome again, that would be brutal because I really feel like Rome and Bangkok to me are like I feel like they're my cities in some to some extent, and also to a lesser extent Tokyo. Those three maybe, because I just feel I've gotten to know Rome really well over the years just by walking and walking. And I've done so much walking in Bangkok. I swear I've walked every square block of Bangkok for, at one time or another. And I love those two cities. And I look forward so much to it. I am on this trip that I'm going back to Japan. I'm definitely going back to Bangkok. And there are just restaurants, little restaurants that I'm already thinking about. I'm going to go back to that place. I'm going to sit down and this is what I'm going to order. Yeah, I live for that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Oh, one thing we haven't talked about is the fact that you travel on your own. That's your
Yeah.
preferred mode.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
And why is that?
Well, I mean, it has partly to do with me. The first time I went to Europe, I traveled with three friends, and it wasn't a great experience for any of us. And I was often the one who was causing the problems because I was unhappy. Um, I am I'm serendipitous, as I say, but that's a pain in the ass if you're with someone else. Because I'm free to do whatever I want. But if that other person, what are they doing? Am I dragging them along? Let's be free together to go exactly where I want to go and not where you want to go. You know, it's just not right. But I hate having plans. I hate having plans. And I just love to wander and traveling by myself too. Paradoxically, it makes it easier to meet people. I meet more people because I'm not wrapped up in a world of two. You know, when you're a couple, you're tending to interact with each other. I'm free to just chat with whoever, you know. So I think I meet more people, but I don't like to make plans. And I've discovered that when I travel with other people, they get really annoyed with me, and then I get annoyed with them, and it all goes to crap, you know.
All right, let's take some questions from the audience, and please, we've got some great questions, but keep sending them in because we've got a few more minutes left. Someone asked how important it is to speak or understand the local language when you travel, which you've sort of talked about a bit.
Here, I'm just going to take this pair of scissors. This represents an arrow, and you have stuck that arrow right into my heart with your question because that's one of the things that I really feel bad about is that I know all I really have is a little bit of French and a few phrases. I took a beginner Italian course, so I for a while I could sort of get by in Italian, and I know a few Japanese phrases. But the thing is, I really think that that's something that is missing from my travel resume is that I really feel that if I could speak fluently the language of the places that I go to, I would have a much more vibrant experience, meaningful experience. And it really bothers me that I'm not able to snap my fingers and speak those languages. The French helps. Just knowing a little bit of Italian helps, but when you're speaking Italian, I took an Italian course, and I went to a store once, and I asked for something, and I spoke every single word in Italian. I said it in Italian, and the shop owner looked at me and said, "I'm sorry, I don't speak English." Oh man,
Oh,
I was brutal.
oh,
Yeah, yeah. But anyway,
burn.
no,
How do
I
you say
think,
burn in Italian?
yeah, yeah. Anyway, that's so, but I think that's a great thing. If you can do that, boy, more power to you.
Okay, next question. I wonder whether or not Steve ever wants to have experiences that require confirmation via phone, like a restaurant or a specific tour. How do you manage two-factor authentication for banking and credit card? This is a person who's reluctant to travel without using her regular phone number or
Right.
use her.
Well, two-factor authentication, that's a tough one. The answer, how do I manage it? I don't. Um, the thing, I always have my laptop with me, so I'm not completely out to lunch. And I can, but yeah, the two-factor authentication thing has cropped up. Um, I try to make sure that I have access to money, um, and when it comes right down to it, there are ATMs. They're often expensive, but there are ATMs. So these days, you usually don't get stuck without money. But yeah, no two-factor. Anything that requires two-factor authentication, no. And more to directly to answer the question, there was a couple of things, for example, like these scooters in Rome that I was interested in renting. Nope, need a phone. No
Yeah.
phone, no rent. So yeah, it's just you pay a price. You pay a price for sure.
Okay, another question from Bill. Have you read Agnes Callard, The Case Against Travel?
No, I haven't. I haven't. What does she
Okay.
say? What does she say?
What does she say, Bill? I don't know.
I
I'm
read
guessing she argues a case against
against
travel.
travel. That is what I'm picking up on. And you are a book reviewer, and I can tell that from the way you just suss that out. But no, I did read another book called, I believe it's called Overbooked, um, and that is by Elizabeth Becker. And that's she didn't come right down against tourism, but that was an interesting book. That was very critical of tourism. That came out in about 2016, I think. I also picked up a book that I quote from briefly called The Tourist. It was written in the 1970s. It's a book that is written in a heavy academic style.
Oh,
Um, it very, very hard to read. But it did make some, there were glimmers of light in it that I could pick up. But he was his name was Dean something or other. I quote him a couple of times in the book, but he's very, very uh, dismissive, snarky, even about tourism in general. To
hmm.
much more than I certainly am. But this other book I didn't read, so
Okay, well, now you can add it to you could read it on the flight when you're
yeah.
not getting any free water.
And if it makes a great case against tourism, then what do I do? I to try the exit door or something?
Kind of hooped, Steve, at that point.
Man, I'm hooped. I'm hooked.
All right, next question. How do you feel about the negative reactions of locals to over tourism, which has been happening in places like Barcelona and some of the Greek islands?
Right.
Good question.
I feel for the poor tourists who are getting shot with water pistols when they're just trying to eat. It's like they're carrying the sins of all the other travelers. But boy, no, you have to sympathize because yeah, like Spain. I was talking about this just the other day. Spain tourism is huge in Spain, a lot of the protests have been in Spain. Tourism is 13%, almost 13% of Spain's GDP. So it's important. But on the other hand, most of the jobs that are being created are low level jobs. They're not high paying jobs. And meanwhile, Airbnb, which is rampant in Barcelona, is driving up the cost of living for ordinary people. And what happened during the pandemic was people, in Barcelona and other over touristed cities began to realize what it was like to be in a city when the tourists were gone, and they liked it. So now I absolutely sympathize. Um, on the other hand, it's like I said, I don't want to, if I'm attacked in a restaurant, I'm not going to be going, good on you, way to go, yes, hit me again, another one, please. Um, but no, I absolutely have sympathy. The other thing, and the other thing about that is that when you go, like, in Japan, as I said before, 98% of tourism goes on what they call the Golden Route, which is Tokyo, Kyoto, Osaka, and also in there Mount Fuji. And meanwhile, I was talking to somebody in northern Japan saying, come here, you will be treated well because we want your business. You're not a nuisance to us. We need the help. I went to a little town. There's a chapter in the book about the town of Miyama. And this is a town that's trying not to die. And they very much want tourists. Tourists that are going to come there are going to be welcomed. So it's a matter of where you go too. It's try to find places to go where they're going to welcome your dollar, and not consider you just a pest, a locust.
Next question from Heather. What criteria do you use to select a destination? Currency exchange, food, culture, UNESCO sites, national parks?
Boy, there's a good question. Kind of personal interest. On that first trip, I write so much. I have that chapter in the book about the polio race in Siena.
Yes.
Which I went back to that 5 times, and it became a central travel experience for me. I went there because I saw a documentary about polio. And I went, wow, what's this? And I really wanted to go on that first trip with my friends. And so it can be all kinds of things. I remember I went to Istanbul purely because I saw a documentary in which I saw the Hagia Sophia church. And went, whoa, I'd like to see that. So it's random stuff. It's mostly just if I hear about a place, if I hear a number of things about it and it seems like a fascinating place. UNESCO heritage site, usually no, because I don't like going to places. Like when I went to Cambodia, I didn't go to Angkor Wat. I'm sure Angkor Wat is fabulous. I'm not saying don't go to Angkor Wat. It's just I didn't want to go to Angkor Wat. I don't want to be in that zoo. I don't want to go to the zoo. So I don't go to the UNESCO heritage sites very much. Although the town of Miyama that I describe in the book, I did go there because it was singled out by UNESCO as a place where they do tourism right. And I wanted to go to a place to find out why that was. Why are they considered a place that does tourism right?
And what did you discover?
What I discovered was that they were fascinating. It was a fascinating population where they were determined not to profit too much. They were determined not to let tourism change their town to the point where they didn't even want more vending machines. Vending machines are a big deal in Japan. You can get a lot of things from vending machines. Like, never mind not turning into Disneyland, they didn't want more vending machines because and they like the woman who was running the local 2-person tourism board was saying, why don't we get people to get professional training to be guides, and then you can make money being a guide? And the local people said, no, we don't want to make money being guides. They want visitors, but they didn't want to profit that much. Like they obviously they want some economic benefit, but they didn't want to turn into tourist mongers, basically. So that was a fascinating thing. A fascinating place to go. So, yeah, I mean, how do I choose places? It's just kind of the places that catch my interest. you know. And oh, and there's another thing again, I should say, and this is in the book, and that's kind of a shameful thing. But I gradually, in retrospect, realized that subconsciously, one of the things that made me choose my travel destinations was movies.
Which is
Um,
fascinating.
yeah, and that was like I do describe in the book. It was a absolute gobsmacking experience for me. I saw the movie Day of the Jackal when I was about 15 years old. I didn't see it again till about maybe 10 years ago. And when I saw it, I just went, "Oh my God, that's why I went where I went in Europe because of Day of the Jackal." And I didn't even realize it. But that movie planted things in my head when I was 15. Um, I went almost everywhere the jackal went, and I didn't even do it consciously. It's just that was mind blowing for me. So, yeah, I mean, I think I'm the intrepid traveler going here, there, and the other place. No, I'm going where the movies tell me to go.
I went on a Sopranos tour of New Jersey once. Okay, here's a question from Jennifer, and this is a really good point. Have you found it easier to travel so freely because you're a man? I ask as some parts of the world are patriarchal. I've traveled as a solo woman and had both good and not so good experiences, but I was always aware that I was looking over my shoulder. Can
Yeah.
relate, Jennifer.
Absolutely true. And I interview a woman in the book specifically on that point. Her name is Alex Temblador. She's a travel writer and she's based in Texas. And I specifically wanted to talk to her about that topic. And she did say that she's had, difficult experiences. She's pretty bold, and she doesn't mind telling. She'll turn around and use the language that she has to use. But sometimes if someone is going to be violent, then language isn't going to help that much. Uh, she she is, and she also had problems with being a person of color. So we were talking about both those things. And not just a male; I'm a white male. I am absolutely aware when I'm traveling of how much I get away with by being a white male. There's just no doubt about it. Like like for example, I was in Georgetown, Malaysia, which is a favorite place of mine because it's got some of the best food in the world. There's a
Mm.
fancy hotel there, the E&O, Eastern and Oriental, I think it's called. Um, Fancy old colonial hotel. And I'm walking along and I feel the need to go to the bathroom. I just waltz right into the lobby of the E&O and slide on over to the bathrooms and nobody questions me because I look like a guest. What
Yeah.
if I didn't look like a guest? I'm absolutely aware of the fact that I get away with a hell of a lot because of what I look like and who I am.
Um, oh, this is a good question. A craft question. What was the most difficult thing about writing your book?
Ha ha! Getting the book deal. That was the difficult part. That was brutally difficult. Those and those of you I know who have been following closely my writing career um, may recall that Marsha, we met when you interviewed me about my first book that came out
Yep.
in 2011. It was called Who Killed Mom.
Yep.
Well,
I interviewed you at Cafe Artigiano on Hornby.
yep, and that was in 2011, as I say. This book, Reservations, came out in 2024. I was trying to get a book deal in the entire interim between 2011 and 2024. I was trying to get another book deal and failing and failing. Um, and I had some really low moments where I really thought, well, that's it. I mean, my last chance is gone. I'm never going to have another chance to write another book. And writing books is what I want to do more than anything else. So getting the book deal was the hard part. Once I
And was
got
it this book you were trying to sell or?
Well, there were a bunch. Like it was like that's a long time between 2011. I had a lot of proposals. I wrote two complete novels that no one has ever looked at. I wrote a lot of proposals. And Dave and I came up with the idea for this book, and then the pandemic hit, and we realized, okay, a travel book is not going to sell because nobody's traveling. So then we switched over to a different proposal, and that got shot down. And so we decided by that time the pandemic was kind of waning, and we said, well, why don't we just try to pull that one out again? And we got a deal from Harbor and Douglas and McIntyre. But After that, I don't want to be Pollyanna-ish about it, but there was nothing difficult about writing this book after that because it was just so much a labor of love. I'd been trying for so long to get this book deal that when I got it, I felt like I'd won the lottery. And every day that I woke up and realized I can go write my book, it was just joyous. It was really writing this book was a joyous experience from beginning to end. So, yeah, it was getting the deal. That was the hard part.
Oh, that's great to hear. Not that it was hard to get the deal, but how much you enjoyed writing the book. We've got really time for just one more question, and I think this is a good one. What has been the most peculiar place you ever visited? And there are quite a few candidates in this book, I would say. The UFO town,
Oh
the
yeah.
Creation Museum.
Oh, except that
Um,
I never went to the Creation Museum. I
oh,
interviewed someone who went to the Creation Museum, but I never did.
okay.
Um, well, but boy, that there's a list. There's even some that aren't in the book that are pretty bizarre. There's a
Yeah.
place. There's a place in Chiang Rai, not Chiang Mai, but Chiang Rai in northern Thailand, called the White Temple. That's a bizarre place. And there's another place that's nicknamed the Black Temple, in which almost all of the decoration is animal related. Um, it's those places are strange. Um, I went to oh gosh, what did you just mention one to me a moment ago?
Yeah, the UFO town
Oh
in
yeah,
Japan.
yeah, yeah. UFO Town, that was great.
Can you
And
just explain what it is
oh,
briefly?
it's a high end museum in a place called Hakui City, which is in basically in northern Japan, and on the Noto Peninsula. And they got a whole bunch of government money to build a UFO museum. It's also a space museum. They have like legit space artifacts there. The last lunar landing module, or the last spacesuit. I think Eugene Cernan. I think his spacesuit is there. A Russian lunar lander is there, but it's also got a whole bunch of UFO stuff. It's got actual X Files. And it's a UFO museum, basically shaped like a saucer. And then you can go to the UFO ramen joint in the town, and he'll serve you a bowl of ramen in which every item in the bowl of ramen tells the story of an alien abduction. Uh, that was pretty great. There, I once I didn't put this in the book, but in Vietnam, I once tried to go to get a cup of coffee and ended up in a brothel. Uh,
How does that happen, Steve?
well, because it was the only place to get coffee. I was looking for a place. I couldn't find any place. And I went into this place and sat down. And the girl came over and I was like, have a cup of coffee. And and no, I just want a cup of coffee. And then the madam came out and was talking, and she was basically interrogating me to see what my deal was. Um, but eventually they just kind of figured out, no, this dude just wants coffee. Uh, that was a weird one. I didn't put that in the book. Who knows? There could be another one. Yeah.
Steve, it has been an absolute delight to spend time with you in your book, on your travels, and on this call. And thank you to you. Thanks for all the amazing questions, and to everyone who's been uh, coming along this journey with us, because it's been really fun. And now I'm really in the mood for UFO ramen. So to see what I can whip up downstairs.
Thank you, Marsha. This was great. It was a lot of fun. And just a reminder that Marsha's book is called Kiss the Red Stairs, and it's absolutely a very worthwhile read. It's a very moving, powerful book. And as we've just passed the 80th anniversary of the freedom, the liberation of Auschwitz, it's a very timely book as well. So I would encourage you all to go out and get Marsha's book, Kiss the Red Stairs.
Thank you, Steve. Check's in the mail.
Log rolling.
And now Josh is going to take it away.
Hello, everyone. My name is Josh. I'm from the North Vancouver District Public Library. On behalf of all the North Shore Libraries, thank you so much to Steve and Marsha for such a wonderful conversation. It was an honor and a pleasure to listen to both of you. I do want to say, Steve, I'm glad you were able to join us, even though you just like having plans so much. Um, I really enjoyed listening to you talk about embracing serendipity in your travel. It sounds like a wonderful idea, something I hope to do sometime. And now apparently I also need to watch Day of the Jackal. It's not one I've heard of.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. It holds
Thank
up.
you.
It holds up very well.
Nice. Thanks to all the attendees for your questions and your thoughtful engagement. We appreciate all of you being here with us in this virtual space. Oh, should I hold mine up for you since we're all
Yes, we're all doing it. All the kids are doing it.
Mine's blurry.
Yeah, mine's reversed.
If you haven't read Reservations yet, each of the North Shore Library systems has several copies available, so please be sure to visit and borrow a copy, or you can support your local bookstore. And if you have read it already, please be sure to recommend it to a friend or family member, colleague, enemy, pet, whoever. Lastly, if you have any feedback about the event, you can contact us via the email that sent you the Zoom link. So once again, thank you so much to Steve and Marsha and my colleagues at the North Shore Libraries for making this event happen. Thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening, and we hope you will join us again for our next North Shore Reads event.
Good night, everyone. Happy travels.
Thanks, everybody. This was a lot of fun.